Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I am here with Lance from the Serfs. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me. This is an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, and you're welcome for coming on. So first question I have here is where are you from and where did you grow up?
I am from Vancouver, Canada. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I spent some years in smaller towns near Vancouver, Canada, and I've also spent a couple of years abroad in various places. Half my family is from Catalonia originally, and the other half is Indigenous Canadian. So I'm a mix of the colonizers and the colonized. And I have spent some time in Barcelona visiting Spain, Catalonia, and my family there, but mostly Vancouver and various parts of Vancouver. Outside of I have lived and worked in other countries a bit. I worked in Japan for a little while. I've worked in New York for a little while in the film industry there. And now I'm in Vancouver. I was going to be, me and my partner wanted to go to the UK for a little while
Mhm.
as well. And that was before COVID and the world changed.
Yeah,
So now everyone's plans have changed a little bit.
that's cool. How old are you, by the way? I've never heard you say your age.
I'm closer to 40 than 30. Let's say that. I'm in my mid
Okay.
30s. Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
because I this whole time I was assuming like late 20s or something, but then you said,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then
People call me a fetus online and shit, and I'm like,
yeah,
what?
because
I'm an old man.
yeah, because you were
I'm
because
old.
yeah, because you said because you told me earlier that you have your bachelor's degree, and then you started talking about how you've worked in other countries and whatnot. I'm like, wait,
Oh,
how
you're
old
like, how
is
much time
this
did you
guy?
have?
Like, what? There's no way
Yeah.
he's done all this, and he's like 28 or something. But
Yeah, it's gonna
yeah,
be wild when I turn like 40 and I'll be the oldest person streaming on Twitch about like useless drama and saying poggies and other weird stuff like that. It's gonna be strange.
oh wow, that's crazy. So you were like let me see. So you had to be like a teenager when like Nickelback became a thing, right?
Yes, I was a
Okay.
teenager when Britney Spears first broke out. I was a teenager when Nickelback became famous. I was in college during 9/11, but yeah, I've seen some stuff. I've seen some things. I'm weathered.
Oh wow. Oh, that's that's wild. Okay. Yeah. So oh wait, before even though this is part of the latter question, are you a fan of Nickelback?
I am not, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Okay. We'll try not to
Yeah,
hold that against you on on the show.
is that a big
Okay.
part of the show? Is this like a Nickelback
I mean, not
on the
really.
side?
Not necessarily, but like I like Nickelback, and it's kind of a joke that I go really
if
hard
it,
for Nickelback on in my tweets and on the show. I like
Hey,
some
that
Nickelback,
is
but I'm
brave.
not. Yeah,
That is brave. That's not a popular position to
even in
have. I will say
Canada.
that. Well, in Canada, they're kind of like the McDonald's of like Canadian touring acts. Canada actually likes Drake and Justin Bieber more than they like Nickelback. I'll tell you this though, I have met Chad Kroger at a
Oh,
bar
okay.
in Vancouver where I was working as a barback, so I've seen him before. So that's my only Nickelback story. It wasn't very eventful. He was just courteous and paid his bills and tipped well apparently. I wouldn't know. I was working behind the bar.
That's interesting. Yeah. Um. Oh well. Yeah, because I was thinking, what was it? I said to someone, I don't know if this would be accurate, but I was talking to someone one day. I said, like Nickelback is like kind of like Rush in like Canada, and they're like, there's no way, and I'm like, I would imagine so. Is that like, would that be accurate for you to say, like, because I know Rush is also like a huge
uh,
rock band from Canada, but like would
yeah,
Nickelback?
Rush are no, it wouldn't be accurate. Rush are
Okay.
more like just classic rock legends kind of idea. And Nickelback are more just like one of the most popular kind of rock pop groups globally that just happen to come from Canada.
Okay,
And then
so
they birthed a lot of other bands like Theory of a Dead
Dead
Man, was
Man,
that
yeah.
it? Yeah, Theory of a Dead Man, and like a whole bunch of other bands broke off around that genre.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about uh I think that's all people would say in Canada. I like people who are Rush fans are such massive Rush fans that they would probably get very upset at that statement. So I'm not
Okay.
gonna,
Well, I'm
I'm
gonna
not gonna
edit
make it
that one out
because
of the
yeah, I
show.
know, I don't,
No.
I don't want to be, I don't want to be canceled by Rush fans. They love Rush, so
Yeah.
yeah.
It's okay. I go after Metallica on a regular basis, so I'll take it.
Wow.
But yeah. Whoa, 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 whoa! Stop what you're doing. Okay. If you like this video and you like the other content on my channel, please hit the like button on this video. Also, go hit subscribe like right now. And also, when you hit subscribe, click the bell so you can get notifications whenever I put out a new video. So, thanks. All right, enjoy the rest of the video. So, what got you interested in politics? Were you always interested, even when you were like a teenager, young adult?
I mean, shamelessly, I was interested as a teenager, but it wasn't because I was like, I really want there to be more progressive politicians in Canada. It was more like I
Mhm.
want them to legalize weed or other stuff like that. Teenager stuff. Not that I don't think you should legalize weed everywhere. I think marijuana should be legal across the board, but more just like that's something that concerns you because I was just kind of a teenager with like,
Yeah.
I wasn't really thinking bigger picture. I got a lot more politically active in college. I think PragerU was right. College radicalized me. But just it actually got me involved in like actual street politics. Like I started volunteering for the NDP and I started like trying out other stuff. And I started going to like a lot of lectures that may have not been stuff I was normally into and reading a lot of different books and theory and stuff. And so that helped a lot. I've always had really active political parents. Like my mom's always been very active, especially in the anti-pipeline protests and stuff of that nature. So she's been heavily involved in that and indigenous issues because she's also like an indigenous child counselor and stuff like that. So I think a mix of family influence, and then as I just got older I became more interested. For me though, it's also like it's a bit of an addiction. I don't know about you, but like I can't stop watching politics too. It's
Yeah.
not just that I'm like I want to involve myself in it. It's more like I can't turn away. Like I just need to read every day about all the stuff that's happening around the world.
Yeah, I feel that. Like for me, I've been uh let's see. I guess I could say interested. I guess even when I was like about 4 or 5 years old, because I was like when I first was like aware of politics. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I was four, is 2002. So yeah. There was a governor's election in my home state, Oklahoma, which is where I'm
Okay.
still at. And one of the people running was from my hometown. Actually, at the time, he was my state senator, and he was a Democrat, and we voted for him. And it was really cool for like my early like childhood years into teen years having a governor that was from my hometown, and
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
that was like really cool. I've even gotten to meet him, and
Nice.
since then, since he was governor, not while he was governor, but yeah. And I remember watching like CNN on the news coming home as like a kid. Like I remember and paying attention to stuff like the Iraq War and stuff like that. And I remember sometimes watching like Jon Stewart and Colbert with my parents.
Classic.
But yeah, like that was I was always kind of interested in it, but like never decided to like make it part of like, you know, what I do in life until like my senior year of high school. But yeah,
Okay.
let's see. So what made you start doing streaming in YouTube? What made you want to start doing that?
I didn't start doing streaming on YouTube. I started doing podcasting. Me and the other guy who's part of the Serfs called Dave.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing a podcast for about a year, and it got reasonably popular. It wasn't like the biggest one ever, but it got pretty popular in Canada and US. And then we turned it into a YouTube channel, and we tried to first animate some of the episodes using these like cartoon dogs instead of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where the cartoon dogs come from. People always ask if I'm a furry. I'm like, no, actually, I didn't know. I didn't even know about it. Well, I learned about all that from the internet. I learned about fursonas and furries and all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of like furry culture because in high school I wasn't, so I didn't know anything about it
Yeah.
after later in life. And so that's where they come from. We started the YouTube channel, and then we went from making kind of like podcast episodes into like short form documentaries on like right wing grifters, like Joe Rogan, PewDiePie, and then talking a little bit about like capitalism and politics and stuff like that in between. And then our channel kept growing, and I was like, well, this is really neat. And that's right around the time that the whole like bread tube thing started
Yeah.
becoming a thing. Like that's when people were like, oh wow, H Bomber Guy and ContraPoints have like 300,000 subs. It's wild. And like now everyone is like blowing up. And then we got shut down right when we were at like 7,000 subs. Then the channel just got deleted off the internet. And that's when I was just like, because I was like, I thought we were working so hard and we were so excited and we were like, wow, 7,000 subs. This is such a huge amount. And then it got destroyed. And so that's what led to Michael Brooks and Sam Cedar having us on the show, and I guess you finding out about us and a lot of people finding out about us, because that happened. That's something nowadays that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like how many times you log on online, it's like big lefty producer channel taken down or video taken down or strike on video. Now I think it's like every day I see someone different where it happens, right? So I guess we were some of the original ones just to get like falsely mass flagged and our channel taken down like incorrectly.
Yeah, like, oh wow, because I don't remember when the term bread tube was coined. I just remember hearing it, like, and I think the first time I ever heard the term was maybe 2018 or 2017, I don't know. But like I remember like someone said something one day and they were like, oh, that term's like relatively like newer than that, or like not as new, because I thought that it was something that had been around since like 2013 or 2014. And when someone said to me like, oh no, this is like a post 2016 thing, I'm like, really? Like, okay. Like, I guess like I wasn't really on the internet much before like the 2016 election. I followed politics, but it was mostly literally watching TV and stuff. But as far as you, okay.
Sorry, my dogs are running around.
but as far as like YouTube and stuff, like that was something I was new to when I got to college, and like seeing people blow up really quickly. Not really, well, it feels really quickly because it was like, only a couple of years time, and like seeing other people, smaller creators get bigger and stuff like that. It's just really interesting. So let's talk about the election. There's going to be an election in Canada
September 20th.
Yeah, a week from today, correct? Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah, so why did Trudeau call for this election?
So if your viewers are unfamiliar, we have a parliamentary system in Canada, which means it's similar to the same ones of most of the old British empires, in which we don't actually get to elect our prime minister. So I can't vote for Justin Trudeau. We elect a local MP, aka a member of parliament, and then they go to the House, and then they represent us on behalf of our area or our constituency, if you will. And then if they can form enough of them together, kind of like a giant Power Ranger style thing, then that form, if they hit the magic number of 170, it's 170 MPs, they get to be a majority government, meaning they rule with complete power, similar to how actually your system is different because the president is separate from both the Senate and the House. So it would give you essentially all three governing bodies without the Senate, but the Senate is a weirder thing in Canada. I won't get into that yet. But let's just say you get to really dictate what happens as a majority government. Trudeau was already in a minority government before this election, and he had basically done that throughout the pandemic, with the NDP being the ones that were propping him up. The NDP is led by Jagmeet Singh. They're the ones that are much more closer to someone like, say, Bernie Sanders. They're very similar in that they want very big taxation on the rich to pay for everybody else kind of idea. And they're for the workers, they're for unions, cooperatives, all that great stuff. So in the middle of this, Justin Trudeau realized, because he was polling very high, that this program we had in Canada called CERB, which was basically at the start of the pandemic, you know how y'all got what, $1,400 or $1,600, I think, for the first time, and then the second time was $1,400. the NDP said you have to do something where you give people money if you're going to do a full lockdown, because we did a full lockdown, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, how do they pay rent? How do they eat? How, like, not everyone can go to work, not everyone can work at home. We need some kind of a UBI, and so the NDP and the Liberals came together and made CERB, which was $2,000 a month, every month to everyone, no questions asked. You just log onto a website, push a couple buttons, you get $2,000 every month, and it worked really well. Like, it saved lives, people didn't get kicked out, rent got paid, food got into mouths, all that kind of stuff. So Justin Trudeau, even though he's got so many scandals, even though he's such a like kind of piece of shit, his popularity was still doing great at the pandemic. And so he was like, now's my chance. I can become a majority again. So it's power. Short answer, power.
Yeah.
He wanted more power. That was the reason.
Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion Show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Yeah, because I remember last year whenever the pandemic was getting started and whatnot, and people were talking about Canada and how they were getting, well, it's 2000 a month, right? And we
Mhm.
only got, I mean, sure, people got unemployment benefits and whatever. Then there was the one time $1,200 check, but the unemployment benefits, were kind of, targeted to people who lost their jobs due to the pandemic. And also the checks, they only went to people who had full-time jobs the prior year. So there was a lot of people, like college kids like myself and other people, who got left out. So even in Canada, college kids, or people who weren't necessarily of full-time work, got to also get the 2000 a month, or was it a
No, it wasn't. So, okay, here's how it worked. Anyone could apply for it, and there was no vetting process. So any single Canadian, doesn't matter, even if you were like lying and you were like, 12 years, oh, you can do it. It had an age tracker. But
yeah,
anyways, if you were of the age that you could apply for, if you could apply for a job in Canada, you could apply for a CERB. If you were of that age, anyone could do it. And then after the fact, they told you, well, here's the conditions, and you're going to have to prove it later. They just didn't want to do this thing. And this is what the NDP fought for. They didn't want to do this long process where everyone had to go through a vetting process, which would cost millions and millions of dollars
yeah,
to go through every single one. And in that process, deny people the money because they essentially
yeah,
needed it right away. So the idea was everyone just gets it if they want it. And then afterwards you have to prove it. But you basically, you couldn't have had a job. You couldn't have had or you couldn't be, it wouldn't be, it doesn't matter if you were unemployed. So you could have just been like unemployed and homeless. That wouldn't have mattered. You would have been applicable for it. You just couldn't be in the middle of a full-time or part-time job that paid you enough, aka enough to
yeah,
live, if you were working at home. That way people who like are already making like I don't know, 40 to 80K a year weren't also getting this in addition to. That was kind of what they wanted to stop, and that's what the program essentially did. But for the most part, there was one for students because it gave students an allotment. I think it was less, it was 1,600 or something. There's
okay.
one for Canadians with disabilities. There was a separate one as well, but more or less, most people who needed it got it, was kind of the point.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's still way better than how we handled it here in America.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I had a hard time complaining because like I was like, that was actually a good thing. I wish they would keep doing it, or at least they would
yeah,
have something similar that always took place, right? Because it works so well. But yeah.
yeah. So I I follow Canadian politics like a little bit, but not as
Mhm.
closely as American politics. I have read a little bit about, maybe not extensively, about the history of the three major political parties in Canada. But could you tell me a little bit about the different voter bases for the parties, more specifically the NDP, liberals, and conservatives? Like who traditionally votes for those group or those
Each
parties?
party.
Yeah.
The liberals usually historically have power in Canada. They almost they're one of the most frequent governing bodies, and it would usually jump between the liberals and the conservatives, with the NDP sometimes playing like a prop up situation with a minority government. Once coming, I believe, with enough seats somewhere in the 60s. I'm going to be way off on this one, but there's one time where they actually formed like I want to say a minority government. Outside of that, they're always like a third party or a fourth party
Yeah.
alongside the other parties in Canada. So the Liberals almost always in power. They basically are center to center right in their politics. They're usually socially a little bit center left, but fiscally and business wise, they'll be center to center right, as in they're very pro energy, they're very pro pipelines, they're very pro oil sands, they're very pro business, very pro housing, stuff like that. So that's why the Liberals govern so successfully, because people like conservatives sometimes vote for them, and people who are centrists sometimes vote for them, and people who are even left sometimes vote for them, because it sometimes covers their basis. Like I know it's basically like they're essentially neoliberals. They're going to allow you to have things like gay marriage and maybe legalize marijuana, but they're also going to be very destructive to the climate and be pro pipeline and pro business and stuff like that. The conservatives are conservative, but they're a little bit different than Republicans in the United States.
Yeah.
Republicans would be seen as closer to maybe further right than the conservatives. Because two things that no one touches in Canada, no matter who you are, typically are things like healthcare, because it's just not popular. Like no one wants to give it up. Why would they? It's free and it's great if you need it for certain things. And secondly, things like abortion, for example, which is typically a conservative talking point, but they also don't really open it up in Canada. So the conservatives are kind of they're center right to right, but they've had another splinter, and there's a new party that came out of that. And I'm going to talk about them in a second. Outside of those, you have the NDP, which again would put position to the left, currently under Jagmeet Singh. Their last really huge like popular resurrection was under Jack Layton. But either way, the NDP usually are very worker focused, so they're going to be very invested in pro unions, making unions stronger in Canada. They're much better on environmental policies. Right now, they're really big on kind of Bernie Sanders-esque ideas. So let's tax the rich a whole bunch. Let's end corporate welfare. Let's make Amazon pay its fair share, stuff like that, and use that money to pay for what we don't have, like free college educations for everybody, free dental care, free pharma care, free eye care, none of which we have in Canada. So that's been their big policy, all things that I'm like, check mark, check mark, check mark. Then the next three are the smaller ones. You have the Bloc Québécois, which will be something weird for American viewers. They are separatists, and they want Quebec to separate from Canada. They've come exceptionally close. I think in I want to say 93 or 94, they voted with like 49% saying yes to separate, and that's the closest they've come. But then Quebec would have been its own country, like independent of Canada. They would have separated. So that's the bloc, but they're not very powerful anymore. There's the Greens, who have also kind of collapsed into themselves, unfortunately, because of a whole bunch of inner politics and drama, a lot of stuff going on. And then there's lastly the PPC, which is the kind of far right racist party of Canada, which splintered from the Conservatives. And now this year is becoming more popular because of anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers. And they've kind of said that they are the Freedom Party. So they're going to open up, and there's no lockdowns, no vaccine mandates, no vaccine passports. Like that's why they become really popular lately, because there is a strong movement for that in Canada. A lot of people who are ex-QAnoners, Pizzagate, combination of that, anti-maskers, all rolled into one.
Ex-QAnoners?
Well, and QAnoners. I mean, QAnon was very popular in Canada,
Yeah.
which is weird because, like,
Yeah.
Donald Trump wasn't even Canadian, but QAnon
Yeah.
was very popular here. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
popular everywhere, man. It was popular in Germany,
Yeah.
of all places. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would say but the difference in what is it? Yeah, but the difference in Canada and America when it comes to these kinds of movements, like when it comes to, you said what was it, the PPC? Is that what
Yeah, the PPC.
so they're anti-vaxxers,
Yes.
anti-maskers. So like the difference between America and Canada is that party in Canada will exist, but odds are they might get what, no more than maybe 4 seats in parliament. But
Right now they're looking at 10%. That's as high as it's going. But yeah, you're
so
right.
yeah, but
Yeah.
here in America, they might hold 60% of statewide rate or
But there's a
state
different
races or
there's a difference
whatever, state
between like
legislatures.
Marjorie Taylor Greene and like, other politicians, right? Like there's
Yeah,
still are like they're all, I know all Republicans are the same bubble, but there's like the QAnon Republicans, and then there's like the rhinos, and
yeah,
there's the Tea Partiers, and like,
yeah,
but you're right, it all is essentially the same party. That is true.
yeah. But yeah, because I was talking to a friend of mine. I think she's, yeah, in Germany, and uh, I was telling her, I was like you think you might have your crazies in Germany, but like I don't know, like our crazies are like a third and or 40% of the country, and they're in power most of the time. Like
They are in power most of the time.
I was talking to my friend in Germany. I was like, "How are you feeling about the German election coming up?" She said, "Oh, I'm not really happy about Merkel not being chancellor anymore." And then I was like, "Yeah, it's interesting because what is it? Merkel's considered a right winger in Europe, but in
Mhm.
America, she'd have to be in the same party as me, even though I'm like a
Oh yeah.
socialist."
Oh
But
yeah.
because the Republicans here would call her a communist, even
Oh,
though
absolutely. She's
like
too soft on immigration.
exactly, and like it's like thinking about that is just like wild to me. Like even like the Liberal Party in Canada, like I still would say that they're in large part a little bit to the left of the Democrats here. I mean, like,
Yeah, they are. They are.
yeah,
Well, it depends on which Democrats.
but
Maybe not the like the progressive caucus,
no, of
maybe
course
not the
not. But
Justice
like,
Democrats, but yeah, but definitely. Oh
yeah,
yeah, the average Democrat, they're
yeah,
way further left than someone like
oh
Joe
yeah,
Manchin.
of
Joe
course. Like
Manchin
Joe
would be a
Manchin would be a
Canadian conservative.
conservative, yeah,
Oh yeah, 100%,
yeah,
100%. He would be in the Conservative Party. Oh yeah, no
yeah.
question about that.
Yeah, because I always tell people, I'm like, the Democratic Party is like not like it's a big tent party, but like it's like literally like three or four different like European like political parties all mixed
Mhm.
together. Like, but
Yeah.
yeah, what was the other question I was gonna ask? Oh yeah. So what are some of the big issues being talked about in the election?
The really big issues this year are climate change for obvious reasons. The country was on fire this summer. So that one's been very pressing. And all the parties kind of line up where you'd expect. Liberals are just basically lip service, being like, oh, yes, we will meet these new climate goals, even though we're going to be pro oil and pro business. NDP have said that they're going to end all subsidies to the oil industry, which would be historic if they could. That's never been done since it got privatized. And then afterwards, conservatives had a hard time even adding the fact that climate change is man-made to their policy platform, and they failed at that. So it's not an official conservative policy right now. So that pretty
It's
much is
not
where the
really
main three parties
policy
landed.
though.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But yeah, that's so
Obviously the pandemic is a really
yeah,
big thing too,
yeah.
right? Like they're what's our recovery going to be? Is it ethical to do vaccine passports? Is it how are we going to open back up? How are schools going to open back up? All of those things are at the forefront. We have a lot more federal control in this country than you have in the states. Like in the states, it's very big on states' rights, and it usually comes down to that. And the governors can decide over the president or say like your policy.
Yeah.
So that'll have that's a lot less difficult in Canada. Like for Canadians to do federal policy that'll affect all Canadians is a little simpler outside of things like healthcare. So the pandemic is a huge thing. The economy is always a big thing, but I think right now those are the big three: is climate change, economy, and the pandemic.
Hmm. That's interesting. So what about the uncovering of mass graves of indigenous people? Could you talk a little bit about that and how come that's not being talked about more in this
Yeah,
election?
absolutely. So, Canada, in the history of Canada, the country itself was founded by a gentleman named Sir John A. Macdonald, and he was really well known. I learned about him in high school and actually in elementary school as being this hero who united all the different, the British, the French, united them through both a railway and business opportunities. They united Canada with the company that used to own it called Hudson Bay, and everything was wonderful. And he created this beautiful melting pot that we call Canada. That was the story of Sir John A. Macdonald. But then when you actually grow up and read the real history books, it turns out that he was like a raging racist, and he was actually someone who believed in the superiority of the Aryan race. He was a white supremacist. He was like racist for the standard of the time. He was just like an
Yeah.
objectively horrifying human being. He came up with something called the Indian Act, and what the Indian Act did is it basically established all these rules and regulations for Indigenous people in the country. The first thing it did was establish what were called the reserve system. So it took all these different bands. By the way, bands are the word for tribes. In
Yeah.
the US, they're called tribes. In Canada, they're called bands. Took them all, squished them all, and then even if they have different languages, cultures, religions, history, squished them into these tiny little areas that had deplorable living conditions, were far away from any kind of potential jobs. And so they went largely through things like starvation, unemployment, and the worst thing was it established something called the residential school system. The idea behind that is they actually put it in the codified writing of these programs that they would kill the Indian within the child. So it was a form of cultural genocide. The idea being that they would set up all these residential schools across the country. They would take all the Indigenous kids, and I do mean as many as they could get their hands on, and forcibly put them into these schools where they would erase all of their language, erase their history, erase any familiar connections they might have, erase their religions. And in some ways, they were trying to effectively just completely destroy the idea of Indigenousness and turn them into proper Christian Canadians down the line. The even more important thing is that there was thousands and thousands of kids who died in these. Thousands of kids died from sexual abuse. Thousands of kids died from starvation. Thousands of kids died from torture. One of the schools actually had like an electric chair. So this is like horrifying kind of Nazi shit. That you didn't
Yeah.
probably ever learn about Canada. Like no one did, like it definitely was not a part of the curriculum. And now there's a reckoning because we have these things called, ground penetrating radar that can detect not necessarily human remains, but they can detect things like boxes, for example, or, what is it, caskets. And so they have been able to uncover using this technology thousands and thousands of unmarked mass graves where the children had died and where they were buried. So one really messed up thing is the fact that this was, I think, the first time the world had learned about this. Whereas, like for me, yeah, I always knew about this, as a lot of it, like either Indigenous or part Indigenous people did, because it was just taught either
Yeah.
through family or stuff like that, right? And it was starting to become a lot more known in my generation because we had all these reports that were done on it, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women's Report. So this stuff was starting to come out into the public, but I don't think anyone just really had it like thrown into their face like they have now, where it's just like this was a horrifying genocide and you have to acknowledge it before you can move on, kind of thing. That's the reckoning that they're dealing with. Why is it not a part of our big part of the federal election? Because it's very hard to talk about. It either makes the country look horrifying in relation, and it's a lot of work to do things like reconciliation. So it's not an issue that a lot of people, either Justin Trudeau or conservative leaders, want to bring up. Jagmeet has been kind of good in that, like during the debate, he did like accuse Justin Trudeau of trying to cover up. He accused him to his face of like trying to sue Indigenous kids in court and stuff like that. That is good. Like that should be out there. But yeah, I just, it's not going to be a popular thing for any politician to come out and be like, no, I want to talk to you about Canadian genocide and also how great Canada is, because that's what I'm doing as a politician, right? Because they want to instill, like, you want to instill that sense of hope and change and like vote for me because your future as a Canadian is going to be great. Not vote for me because I'm also going to reflect and make you learn about the hard history of your country, because that doesn't really inspire,
Yeah. I like that. That's I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
politics.
yeah, because like I see this whole thing with uh let's say this is like 100% analogous in any kind of way, but it does have to do with this, where here in Oklahoma we have a lot of tribes here, and the state itself has a relationship with the tribal nations, and our current governor, Kevin Stitt. Oh, you need to look into this guy. He's fun. He'll be running for president in a couple of years.
Again.
He's just been shitting on the tribes left and right. He's had a problem with the Supreme Court affirming their what's it called, um, sovereignty within the state of Oklahoma. He's he's suing the tribes and been wanting to sue the tribes. Had the state legislature vote on to set aside money to so the attorney general can go sue the tribes for whatever reasons he wants. He wants the tribes to pay more taxes because of the casinos and whatnot. And like, it's something that has to be talked about, and it's definitely going to be like an issue coming up in the election. And it's like, just like mind blowing. Like even Republicans, like Republican governors in the past, have not, you know, overstepped on the tribes in such a brazen way like he is, and it's like really disturbing to watch. It's so
That's
like
terrible.
it is, and like it's and and so like I it whenever I hear about what's going on with the indigenous people in Canada, I think about how like Native American politics or Native Americans in U.S. politics don't really get talked about very often, and it's usually a way more local thing or state thing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, you don't
yeah,
see it on like national stages usually.
yeah, but so that's something that I found that was kind of similar when I came to Canada, um, even though the uncovering of the mass graves, that was
Yeah,
a
I
lot
and I'll
more of
say
a big that
this.
was like a bigger story that was international news, and it's
Yeah.
rare that anything with our Native Americans here ever gets to be international news, at least not
And
in
like
recent
in the
memory.
English language debates, it was like an entire section of the debates was talking about indigenous issues and reconciliation. I remember when I was streaming that, I had a lot of American viewers be like, this is really neat, because I've never seen, like, they were like, we would never
Yeah, it never
bring up
happened.
indigenous issues in a presidential debate in America, like ever,
Yeah,
like it just wouldn't be thought of. And he's like, y'all are like dedicating this whole little section in the middle to it. I was like, yeah, that's usually typical. There's usually, but I was like, the problem with Canada is it's usually a lot more posturing than action when it comes to
yeah,
indigenous issues. Like Justin Trudeau's really good at bending the knee and the single tear going down the face and saying how sad he is, and then the next day he'll go and he'll sue indigenous residential school survivors in court. So there has to be, I'd say, more of the actual like substance, material, benefits given to indigenous people when it comes to the reconciliation part, other than just lip service, other than just like, hey, we're going to talk about you for 5 minutes at the debate. Hey, you get a little shout out at the start of the Canadian like music awards. Hey, this will be this. Hey, every single time we start something, we'll say we're on uncharted or unceded territory, as a way of paying respect. It's like, okay, that's really nice and respectful, but I'm sure they probably want some land back too, or something else, right? Like
yeah,
something that's actually a little bit more material in today's day and age than just like, we're friends.
yeah. Interesting stuff. So tell me a little bit more about Canada's handling of the pandemic. So you guys did a full shutdown and gave everyone money. Describe to me what this full shutdown was.
Well, it was provincial, so each province kind of did their own version of the shutdown. I
Okay.
guess this gets a little bit closer to state rights.
Yeah.
My province, British Columbia, which was headed by the NDP at the time, had the best numbers in terms of they shut down fast, hard, and it's not really so much the political party. It has a lot to do with who your health managers are, like who's basically in charge of those positions.
Mhm.
Ours is Dr. Bonnie Henry. She was excellent. She basically was like, "Here's the signs. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to shut down and we're going to slowly open." So we've always had pretty nice numbers in BC. Alberta's always had very bad numbers because they're a little bit closer to what you might consider conservative Canada. They have the highest rates of like anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers, stuff like that. But also Quebec got hit really bad because Quebec had just had, I think, a vacation interchange with the US. I want to say it was spring break. I can't remember the timing exactly, but I think it was spring break. But either way, each different province in Canada kind of locked down differently. And so each one handled it in various ways. Obviously, the CERB was something that was like the envy of other countries. Like I know the US, whenever they found out about that, because I was interviewed by like the Majority Report one time and then another show where I told them that, and they were like, what? Oh, Richard
Mhm.
Wolff, he was the one who was just mind blown. He's like, $2,000 a month? What is this? Which was wild. But in terms of vaccinations, I mean, Canada, it's amazing how fast we vaccinated. but it all came at the expense of, we bought all our vaccines from a variety of sources, including the US, which
Yeah.
is totally fine. But we also bought a lot initially from this global supply fund that's actually supposed to be used for poor countries. And we're
Mhm.
just like a rich country that was like, you know what, we're just going to buy it all and we'll give it back later. So we kind of did a really bad thing. Like, I was actually kind of disgusted that Canada was doing that so quickly. But now, I mean, the vaccine is here. Certain provinces have really high vaccination rates. Like, again, British Columbia has a really high one. Alberta has a lower one, but more or less the vaccination has been pretty much in control. And now they're rolling out vaccine passports. So we just got those. So those are like the latest thing that are obviously highly political and
Yeah.
making a lot of people angry and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, um, so what would you say is yeah, okay, so which province was the well, I guess it'd be multiple ones. So the provinces that were held by the conservatives, did they lock down for as long as the other provinces that were run by liberals and the
Oh,
NDP? Or yeah, like explain that one to me.
Alberta's been the worst example of any Canadian province. It's run by a conservative guy named Jason Kenney, and he
Mhm.
did a lot of things wrong. He slashed like $10,000 nurses jobs near the start of the pandemic, which is always smart. Get rid of a whole bunch of nurses before a
10,000
pandemic hit.
nurses?
Yeah, I want to get that number right just before.
Jeez.
Yeah, Jason
That's a
Kenney.
lot of nurses to get rid of. Wow.
um, and at the same time, it's one of those things that yeah, sorry, 10,000 general support services from the private sector, including nurses, including frontline
Okay.
workers, including healthcare workers, but
That's
most of them
still
were in
insane,
healthcare.
though.
Uh, oh, sorry, 11,000 healthcare jobs.
That's
Yeah,
still
yeah,
insane. Like,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
like
It's wild.
11,000 people in that province. I'm kidding. That's a joke.
I know.
But no, but like but like there's not that, like that's not like Alberta's like can't be no more than like what 5 million people in Alberta.
Let's
Like
see.
that's still a lot of people. Like if you
It
had
it is. It was obviously disastrous. Four million
yeah.
four hundred twenty-eight. So
Yeah,
yeah,
see
you're right.
if that happened in
You almost hit that number
Oklahoma,
perfectly.
yeah, if that happened here in Oklahoma's about 4 million people, we'd be fucked. And we don't even have a national like a health like a public healthcare system like y'all do. Like we'd be fucked.
Yeah.
We wouldn't actually if I probably ran the numbers, we wouldn't have any nurses because I don't think we have or I don't think we have 10,000 or 11,000 health. Well, maybe we do, but I don't know what the numbers would be because all I do know is that like we've had several hospitals close within the last decade because we refused to do Medicaid expansion until last year. So
Oh
either
wow.
way, we'd be fucked if that happened. Like that's insane. Um,
And yeah, he also, like the same guy, Jason Kenney, he ended up doing that and obviously saying because it was a cost saving initiative, and then he spent and lost I think over $1 billion trying to get the Keystone XL pipeline built, which Joe Biden shut down, and so all that money's
yeah,
gone. So obviously a lot of people are justifiably furious at him because it's like, well, you cut all these
yeah,
jobs, you screwed over the province so badly, but you wasted all of it trying to get the pipeline built when I think Biden made it like a promise that he was going to do that too,
yeah,
and effectively did it like as soon as he got on board. So
yeah.
you know, plus one Joe Biden, minus one Canada there, to say the least.
Yeah. But yeah, because I remember like here it was kind of weird because like some states, whenever they did their lockdowns, they lasted at least through the summer, or at
Mhm.
least halfway through the summer, or at least mostly through the summer. A lot of the uh, Democratic controlled states, like states like Oklahoma, there was a lockdown for like maybe month and a
Okay.
half, and then it was
Yeah.
over, and like
And you did a
everyone's
full reopening.
yeah, then everyone's been able to lick doorknobs ever since like
Well, that's freedom.
June of 2020. So like like it was really quick, and then cases rose immediately, and it was bad. I don't know whether to say, looking at a lot of the numbers now, I don't know whether to say a year ago today it was worse than it is now, because I know the cases are pretty much as high, if not higher, because I know the ICU beds are full.
That's really sad.
And it's like insane. Like it's just so horrible. And I'm not
Yes.
even asking for a lockdown now. I'm just like, can we just get vaccinated, please? Can we
Oh, do you
wear
all don't have
masks?
vaccines, or is it? No,
So,
you must have had vaccines for a long time.
oh yeah, we've had vaccines for a long time. Our state was one of like, at first, it was like one of the like higher states that was getting vaccinated, like higher vaccination rates. And that's partially due to the tribes in the rural areas helping out with vaccinations.
Oh wow, that's
And
awesome.
but that kind of leveled off after a while. And now I can't remember what the vaccination rate for Oklahoma is, but our state never enacted a mask mandate, like
Mm.
not statewide. There were some cities that enacted mask mandates, like my hometown, Shawnee. They had a mask mandate. They voted to lift it at the end of April, which was, in my opinion, a little premature. Um, but
It's
let's see.
54%. It says.
Okay, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was it? And
Oh,
they
sorry,
pat.
that's the United States. Oklahoma's
Okay,
45.5.
okay, that still sounds about right. I assumed it was.
Yeah.
I knew it definitely wasn't anything over like close to 60. I knew that much, but like, yeah. What was I about to say? But no, and then the legislature, they passed a bill saying that the schools can't mandate that the kids wear masks.
That's wild.
And now there's a lot of schools that are breaking that rule and going ahead and mandating that the kids wear masks. And it's uh, not enough schools are doing it, but it makes a difference. Even if it's just like a handful of school districts. I
Hmm.
think one of the bigger school districts, or some of the bigger school districts, are doing it. But it's so insane. Like it's like we
It's really
have
sad to see.
it is like, it's just like we have the solutions, we just have to do them, and we're not doing them. And
We just
then
need to cooperate. It really feels that's kind of
exactly,
that's been
like
the thing with the
it's
pandemic since the start. I was like, we just need to cooperate. If we do that,
yeah.
we can get
And
through this. We have the technology.
yeah, and I do, on some level, I do blame the government, whether that be the Trump administration and the Republicans, or now the Democrats, for not giving people enough relief in order to
Hmm.
be able to stay home last year or this year, so they could actually probably be okay with maybe wearing a mask, or probably be okay with not being able to go out anywhere or being able to work. But there's always going to be some people who were never going to be okay with that anyway. But I still feel like, on a large scale, I feel like both the Democrats and Republicans failed in some big ways. Like, don't get me wrong, Biden's been a lot better, but they could have still done a lot more, even at the
Yeah,
beginning
no, I
there.
totally agree. I
Like
totally agree.
but but we can only do so much at this point, and I don't know what the future's gonna look like. It's just kind of scary. But
Yeah.
let's see. What else was I gonna ask? Okay, so how are you feeling about the NDP's chances? Do you think that they're gonna get some more seats in order
I
to?
think they'll get some more seats. There won't be a massive seat change. Probably they'll gain between 5 and 8, which is still nicer. They'll
Yeah.
have more power. I think it's probably going to shape up with a liberal minority and the
Mhm.
NDP slightly more powerful, which is a good
That's
outcome.
better.
By
Yeah.
yes, that's fine by me. It's also a situation in which the conservatives could win a minority government. I don't think anyone will have a majority, but the conservatives could win a minority government, in which case the NDP and the Liberals might have the seats to form what's called a coalition, but they won't, because
Yeah.
it's about power and they're ridiculous. The Liberals, the NDP have, I think, already said they'd agree to a coalition. Um, but yeah, those are the three most likely scenarios that I see playing out: lib minority or conservative minority. If it's a conservative minority, it means we'll probably have an election very shortly. Then they'll just have to move some pieces around, and it'll be pretty big loss for Justin Trudeau. But I think most likely it'll be a liberal minority. Yeah.
Okay. So now I have some more questions about the NDP. So, I assume you've been either a member or NDP voter your entire life, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I bounced back and forth a little bit. I mean, I voted once for the Liberals because that was when Stephen Harper was in power, and I just
Yeah.
really wanted him out. And I ended up voting for someone who's an independent now, Jody Wilson Raybould.
Mhm.
She's an Indigenous candidate, so maybe I didn't vote for the Liberals. She got kicked out of the party, so technically I didn't. Um, but mostly this particular election, I'm working with Breen Ouellette, and anyone who's Canadian and listening to your show, check out electbreen.ca if you want to help him out. I'm doing canvassing and stuff with him. And there's a lot of other great Indigenous NDP candidates across the board. But yeah, more or less, usually the NDP will align themselves pretty closely, I think, to the moment in history, at least since I've been politically
Mhm.
active, that I think the moment calls for. It's just unfortunate they never gain enough seats to actually enact the things they talk about. But they still, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have had something like the CERB program in Canada. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have that like UBI program. We wouldn't have had a lot of the things, and a lot of the other things that we do have now that they're getting pushed up against. It's because they are that alternative that's always like knocking at the door. So it's a good thing. It's not perfect. I wish we'd end our first past the post system. I
Yeah.
wish we'd have proportional voting, representational voting. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. So I remember what was it? I can't remember what year it was. It wasn't that long ago though, but the NDP, they were the I want to say they were the main opposition to whoever the conservative government was in like
Yeah. So when Stephen
2015 or
Harper
before 2015. Yeah.
so they were the official opposition, and that's the first time
Yeah.
they'd been the official opposition in a long time. But it was because the Liberals were in utter tatters. They had no effective leaders. They tried switching their leader like 3 times. Every single one was worse than the one. They didn't get back on track until they made Justin Trudeau their leader.
Yeah.
But they were basically just like they were flip-flopping. It didn't matter when the Conservatives got a majority, because then they just ruled
Yeah.
exactly how they wanted to. And the official opposition in that opportunity essentially can just act as someone who might be able to filibuster for a little while, but you can't really prevent things from passing in Parliament.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until Justin Trudeau came along that Stephen Harper got dethroned. And then we've kind of been bouncing around Trudeau having a majority or a minority government since
Yeah.
then. And then this one will be probably the same.
So what about the NDP or the NDP leaders around that time? What was it just simply because the liberals
Oh,
were in
why did they have so
disarray?
many seats? Oh, well, that
Yeah.
one's also I can explain that one. They had the NDP had a very charismatic leader, Jack Layton, who
Mhm.
was beloved by most political parties, and even people who weren't NDP voters really liked him. He was very honest, candid human.
Yeah.
He unfortunately died from cancer, but the year that he got elected into the official opposition, he basically flipped Quebec. And Quebec has a massively huge voting bloc. They have a lot of seats. So a lot of Quebec went from Liberal to NDP. And then a lot of the rest of Canada, like BC and other places, went from Liberal to Conservative. And so the Conservatives crafted together enough to form their government. And it just looked as if the NDP had suddenly gotten this orange wave in Quebec because of it. That unfortunately doesn't last. Quebec is a very difficult province to predict. They swing in strange ways, and they have a lot of seats. So usually, for me being on the far west coast, the elections will be called before it ever even reaches my province. Like it'll start with the prairies and everything, then it'll hit Quebec and Ontario, and then all of a sudden it's like, we are now ready to call this election in favor of Justin Trudeau. And I'm like, oh well, what about us? We don't even matter. Like everything is decided before you get here, because those two provinces have the most seats.
Yeah. So what did I can't remember the name of the dude, but in 2015, NDP was under the leadership of some guy. I can't remember. What did he
Mulcair.
Yeah. So what was wrong with him that he wasn't able to at least keep some of what
Keep the
NDP
energy going.
had? Yeah, because like seemed like at the time that they really had a shot at being in government.
I
And
think if Jack Layton had lived, they probably would have formed a
yeah,
minority government. They would have grown to form a minority government under Jack Layton. If they could have gotten another election before Trudeau came in, because Trudeau did have the star power, Jack Layton could have been a very viable candidate. But what was wrong with Mulcair? he tried to do what Steinmeier is trying to do for the Labour Party in Britain. He tried to turn it from being kind of a lefty alternative party to another centrist party like the Liberals.
Mm,
So putting forward a lot of policies that you're like, oh, weird, and then trying to like play the Liberals at their own game, and it just doesn't work, right? Like if you went from Jeremy Corbyn, who was trying to be the Bernie Sanders, to someone
yeah,
who's like, I'm basically, Tony Blair, it doesn't always work. And so for the NDP, that's how they kind of collapsed until Jagmeet Singh, and he initially was not very popular, especially in Quebec, unfortunately, because Quebec does have a pretty big problem with racism.
hmm,
But he has grown a lot more in popularity, and he's been a very good vocal moral compass for a lot of issues over the past year since the pandemic started, and that's really resonated with people. Just saying, like, we need to take just the Bernie Sanders arguments. Since the pandemic started, the richest Canadians, especially the companies, have made billions upon billions of dollars, and the poorest Canadians have become infinitely more poor. So why don't we just tax these individuals and these companies more? And he proposed something and brought it to Parliament where all he was going to ask for was like a modest 1% taxation if you have more than $20 million in assets. So if you have more than $20 million, you got some boats, you got some houses, you got some companies, whatever.
yeah,
We're just going to tax you 1% to pay for everyone else. And that's it, which doesn't even seem that much. But he's like, this can raise enough money for us to pay for all the programs we need. And the Liberals were like, no, and they voted against it. Um, but that stuff resonates with people. Bernie Sanders resonated with people. He's saying things that like 10 years ago would have labeled you some radical communist. I mean, the
yeah,
conservatives still called him that, but still, the things he's saying are things that are kind of universal. Like most people agree. Don't you think everyone should have universal healthcare? Shouldn't healthcare be a human right? Shouldn't college and post-secondary education be like something that we already pay for because we have the money for it, right?
yeah,
Shouldn't we be taxing those who have all the wealth to pay for the programs for everyone else? Shouldn't we house the homeless? Things that everyone's like, oh, you know what? Okay, fine. He speaks to me. I don't like the fact that he's a radical communist, but I do like his ideas,
yeah,
and that's working a little bit for Jugmeat right now too.
yeah. Yeah, just I like the NDP a lot. I like a lot of the NPs. I had Matthew Green on my
Oh,
show.
nice,
Yeah, I had
nice.
him
Oh,
on.
Matthew Green is one of my favorite politicians.
Yeah, he's really great. I had him
He's the
on back
example I
in
use when people are
January.
like, "Don't vote. Voting is like worthless. Don't do it. You'll never get like any good leftist in power." I was like, "Go check out Matthew Green. Like
Yeah,
Matthew Green is so based. Check out everything he says and does. He is an excellent example of politics working for you if you like put the time in."
yeah, he's great. Some other ones I like. What to say her name is Nikki
Yeah, Nikki
Ashton.
Ashton. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
she's
great
pretty
too.
great. Yeah. Um, but yeah, well, anyway, the last question I have here is what kind what kind of music do you listen to? Who are some of your favorite music artists?
Oh, I love everything except for like CMT country. But I specifically add the CMT to it because old school like bluegrass and some other forms and folk music is all amazing. But I'd say the two genres I listen to the most are probably EDM and hip hop growing up, and that hasn't really changed. Those were the two that I went back and forth through high school. In terms of EDM, we were listening to old school stuff back then. Like older stuff, maybe like Fatboy Slim, his first couple albums I was really into, but then like since then, obviously I've grown to love like all the big names like Dead Mouse and all of them. Daft Punk are probably one of my favorite all-time electronic producers. In hip hop, it was like Jurassic 5, The Roots, Nas, um, Mos Def, basically. Oh, Deltron 3030 was like one of my favorite albums. And then tons of old school rock and roll. I like what is it? Everything from the older classics that everyone answers with when they're like, oh yeah, I love Pink Floyd, and I'm like, well, I actually didn't, and I love Zeppelin, and I love those bands, all the way to like Radiohead. I think was the band I listened to the most in high school. Yeah, all over the map. And I like heavy metal. I know you make fun of Metallica, but I liked early Metallica before they sold out and became TNT
Whoa,
Napster.
no, no. See, that's where you're wrong. Black Album, Metallica, that's when they were really starting to get into their bag. The Black Album is their best album. I will say their second best album is And Justice for All. I'm a strong believer in that album, no matter how weird the bass sounds. And then after that, I'm also a strong defender of Load and Reload. Uh,
Oh,
but
interesting.
say Anger on the other hand, if you
Oh, Saint
even
Anger, Saint Anger.
Sager is trash. Like if you like, I
Oh.
want like it's weird for me because like I like that's like when Metallica tried to go new metal and try to sound like Corn or whatever,
Mhm.
and like I just despise that entire album. It's so awful.
Okay, which I didn't mind. I didn't mind Corn growing up. I didn't, I liked what became of those kind of genres when they went more hardcore. Like I like System of a Down a lot
Oh yeah.
more than I did of like Corn or anything like that.
Oh, what about Slipknot?
I liked some Slipknot. Slipknot was one of those things where like I couldn't tell if I was more into the aesthetics or the music. Well, there was, yeah, which is odd for
Yeah,
me, which doesn't happen a lot. But I was also like, there is something really cool about these costumes and this whole idea of like this DJ is actually a demon and all this other stuff like that. And I was interested in that, but I didn't necessarily love all their music. Like sometimes
yeah,
songs that just have like like I have a hard time like getting through if I can't understand the lyrics. I'm like, okay, well,
yeah,
I can enjoy this for a while, but
yeah.
yeah.
What about how do you feel about Limp Bizkit?
I think Limp Bizkit is a meme. More than like
No.
I loved Limp Bizkit when I was in high school because everyone did. Our age, Limp Bizkit was cool. Like that was
Yes,
what
Limp
was like
Bizkit is
popular
back,
at my time.
dude. Limp
Oh,
Bizkit is
really?
back. Oh yes, people my
I
age
saw
love
Fred
Limp
Durst had
Bizkit
done
now.
something. Really?
Yes,
Like, but ironically, or like old
no,
school
like
Limp
for
Bizkit, like,
real, like
oh really?
yes, like
That is, I did
seriously,
not see
like
that coming.
I didn't either. Like when I was in high school, which to be clear, I was in high school from 2012 to 2016. I was the only person who listened to Limp Bizkit, like, and knew who Limp Bizkit was. Like most people my age, where I was in high school, like if you did know who Limp Bizkit was, you didn't like Limp Bizkit. But if
Mhm.
you and then
That is
that was
so
it.
random.
But now, like I would say it started to change a little bit around 2019 or so. I
Okay.
go on Twitter now, and there's this thing called grunge Twitter. This is also a part of
Mhm.
it as well. Grunge Twitter is just a bunch of teenagers and like people in their early to mid 20s who just tweet about grunge and new metal all the time. So like, yeah, like it's really weird. Like all of that stuff, Limp Bizkit,
That is random.
Corn, Slipknot, even some of the like lesser known new metal bands like Cold Chamber and Kitty. I'm sure you know who Kitty is. Kitty's Canadian.
Yeah, but don't
Yeah,
don't listen to them. Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, like all of those bands, they're back in style. Like that's like a
Wow.
thing now, and like it's very weird to me because like I'll like when I'm
I thought Nirvana was going to be timeless. I didn't think Limp Bizkit was going to be
right, like I was like, oh
timeless.
well, here we are, and like I meet like I substitute teach at the high school here in my hometown that I went to, graduated from, and I meet more kids now that listen to Limp Bizkit than knew who Limp Bizkit was when I was in high school. And that's just like
Wow.
wild to me. I'm like, that's so weird. Like, oh, so like I feel like personally for me, I'm like, okay, I started the new wave. So I'm responsible for all of these Zoomers listening to Limp Bizkit now.
Congratulations.
But yeah,
It's the new
it's
wave.
exactly. Yeah, it's for real. Like that's they've come back in, well, not come back, but like
I
they're
mean, good
in,
for them.
yeah,
I'm
in a
that that
way,
I'm happy for them.
yeah, in a way that's like the new class. People hate it when I say this, but like that stuff is like the
The
new
new classical
classic
music.
rock now. Yeah, because it's
That's
like
wild.
it's the new
That makes you
classic
feel
rock.
old.
It does,
Yeah.
it should make you feel
Yeah,
old.
yeah. Because I loved classic rock when I was a kid, you know. It was like it
Yeah.
was like I still do love classic rock, but what is classic rock is probably classical rock now, and
Yes,
classic
because
rock
like
is new metal. Yeah.
yeah, because like when I talk to people who are like about your age, maybe a little older, and I tell
Mhm.
them like, oh, like Stained and Corn and stuff like that, like that's classic rock to people my age, and they're like, no, it's
That's true though.
not, and they're
Oh, that
like, I'm
makes
like,
perfect sense. Oh yeah, I wouldn't fight
yeah,
that. I would be like, that
yeah,
makes total sense. Just think of how long it's
yeah,
been since it came out, how it was when it was
exactly,
popular. Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
yeah, because like for me, like it's even a lot of the classic rock stations they play like
They play that now.
Stained and Corn and stuff, and it kind of weirds me out a little bit, but like it
So
makes
so
sense
who's
too.
playing like Bowie and
They still play that stuff. They mix it all together. Like I would
Okay,
say
okay.
the stuff that they probably don't play as much is like 60s stuff. They don't play
I
that
wonder.
stuff
So
as
does the
much.
classic rock stations are just constantly sliding a little bit like this? Like next year, oh, we get to add these like all these bands to the catalog, but then we also lose a couple bands from like the '60s or whatever.
I think that's kind of how it goes.
That's
Cause
wild.
like I'm mostly talking about like terrestrial FM radio, which is a
Yeah,
whole
yeah, yeah.
different like breed of like radio nowadays. But like I think that's kind of how it goes because I don't really listen to a lot of the classic rock stations, but like uh when I do like listen or look into what they're actually playing, like they mostly play stuff from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even mix in a little early 2000s. Uh
Wow.
yeah, because like the new quote unquote new rock mainstream rock stations or active rock is what they call it. Most of those stations are playing 80s and 90s stuff 24/7 too. They don't play a lot of like
Yeah.
newer stuff. And to the extent that they do play any newer stuff, it's bands that came out 15 or 20 years ago, but they're new singles. So
Uh,
like if you go to like the Billboard, the easiest way to look at this is going to Wikipedia because they have the correct info. Like the bands with like the highest number of mainstream rock number one hits is like 3 Days Grace and Shine Down. And it's
wow.
like wait, huh? Because I think what is it? I have it pulled up. Okay, so it says artists with the most number one songs. These are the artists with at least 8 songs that topped the mainstream rock chart. Shinedown has 16, 3 Days Grace has 15, Van Halen has 13. And
Wow.
then the rest is Five Finger Death Punch, Godsmack, Disturbed, Foo Fighters, Megadeth, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Aerosmith, Volbeat, Lincoln.
Then
The new,
Aerosmith. Aerosmith is
yes,
that far down. That's
yes,
wild.
they're at number 9. They have 9 number one, and then Volbeat, Lincoln Park, Nickelback, and Seether. And it's like it's so weird because like the newest band on here is Volbeat, and they're or Volbeat and Five Finger Death Punch because they both came out in '07, I think. So, but
Okay.
yeah, but there's like no way for any like newer bands to really pop off and get popular on FM radio. It's very,
Or
very rare
Spotify,
thing.
and no one makes any money off that.
Yeah, and like the real way to get into any like thing new in terms of like kind of like a radio format is like Sirius XM.
Mhm.
Like that's the real way. They don't spend, at least the mainstream active rock stations on there don't spend their time playing I Will Not Bow. Well, no, let me rephrase because that's a little bit newer. They don't spend their time playing um what's the song? Break Stuff by Limp Bizkit 24 times a day or something like that. Like it's like it's just like interesting. But yeah, oh, what are your thoughts on 3 Days Grace? I always have to ask about the Canadian bands.
I didn't listen to them a ton. I just know the singles. I don't know enough about them to be able to give you like a deep answer. I found the singles kind of catchy. But yeah, I mean, if you would have told me 3 Days Grace was just like they have the most or the second most
Yeah,
number one
second
singles,
most on mainstream
I
rock
never would have
charts.
believed you.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you were like trivia question, true or false, I'm like false, $1,000 doesn't matter. It's 3 Days Grace now.
Yeah,
So that's impressive. I learned something. That's
it
wild.
is like it's something. And the thing is like 3 Days Grace, they changed singers like almost a decade ago. It's like over 2 albums ago by now. But like, and they still crank out hits. But like that wouldn't
Wow.
have happened to a
For
band
anyone
30
else.
years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
It's kind of like these radios, and to be fair, their music still pretty much sounds the same. You barely tell the difference between Matt and Adam, but like that I still meet people who are like, no, they're not the same anymore. I'm like, come on now. They're
They
basically the
change.
same. But the fact that like they're still able to like pretty much crank out hits all the time, doesn't matter what they do. It's still like, I mean, I guess it does say something about the band because I still think they're a really good band, but also it's like I feel like that wouldn't have happened if that happened to them 20 years ago. They would have
Yeah,
been
true.
like, nope, never would have heard from them ever again, or at least they wouldn't have been as big as they are anymore. But yeah. But I think that's all the questions I have for you today.
Well, thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
having me. That was a ton of
Yeah,
fun.
thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully we can have you on again to talk more about
Yeah, I'd love to.
politics. Where can we find you on social media, and what other platforms can we find you on?
You can find me everywhere social media is sold, at the Serfs TV. It's super easy. Twitch.tv/the Serfs TV, YouTube.com/the Serfs TV, Twitter.com/the Serfs TV. And we also have another channel called the Surf Times, which you can find on the YouTubes. We have Surfs at the Cinema, which is another channel. We've got too many channels. We have a lot of worker co-ops. And then I'm also making memes under this weird new channel called Memes of Production. So if you want to see really weird things that I make at wee hours of the night when I should be working, go check out Memes of Production. It's silly.
Oh, yeah, and another question I have: how did you come up with the name the Serfs?
Oh, it's self-evident, no?
No, no, no. Explain. I want to know because I'm curious if it's the thing that I might be thinking, but no, go ahead and explain.
Well, it's definitely a reference to lords and serfs and
Yeah, that's what I
basically the
thought.
difference
Yeah.
in economic systems. Yeah, no, it's not about surfing.
Yeah, I
Contrary to
figured not.
popular opinion.
I figured not. But occasionally people will say something like that. I'm like, do they know? Like, am I missing something?
No.
Or because surfing is spelled with a U, not an E.
It
But
is,
yeah.
yes.
But yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you. Cheers. Bye.